So, who here hasn't at one point or another gone up to someone and asked, hey, what's on your mind? Everyone has. Everyone has. And often the reason why we ask them that is because, frankly, we just want someone to talk to. We're just trying to start a conversation. But in actuality, what's interesting is that the question itself is a lot more profound than we think. The reason why that's the case is because, first of all, it's almost always the case that indeed someone does have something on their mind, but more, what it is that we have on our mind at any specific time is also forming what we are doing and who we are. You know, this is probably, I'm sure, not the first time that people have heard this general spiritual principle that what occurs internally then becomes manifest externally. You know, what we have in our mind, what we have in our consciousness, we then act upon, we then become externally. Well, with that as just kind of the start of what I'm going to be speaking about today, what many people in America now increasingly, very rapidly, throughout the world, have on their mind is, in fact, money, wealth, the economy, finance, etc. As we know, economically speaking, things have not been going well, certainly in the United States, but now globally, all throughout the world. Just yesterday, I think it was yesterday morning, maybe it was this morning, I remember looking on the internet and just looking at different stocks throughout the world and just looking at the indices. And with almost every single nation I looked at, the stock was essentially going like that, downward. Well, again, this is something that very naturally is on people's mind. And with the economy going badly, well, what does this mean? We don't simply have money on our mind. We don't simply have wealth on our mind. We don't simply have the economy on our mind. We have fear in our mind. We have worry in our mind, etc. And of course, as I was saying, with this principle that anything that is internal becomes manifest externally, that fear will become manifest externally in our lives individually, but then socially. And we're even beginning to see that happening, that people around us are indeed becoming fearful for themselves, fearful for their families. What's going to happen? Am I going to lose my home? Am I going to lose my car, my job, etc.? So what I wanted to talk about today, very specifically, is in fact the dharmic concept of wealth and what it means to think in terms of finance, in terms of money, but from a spiritual perspective. You know, it's a very interesting thing. You can go from, you know, one cable network to another, one news source to another, and you'll hear everyone talking about all sorts of economic theories and what we need to do to get ourselves out of the hole that we're in. But rarely do you hear about the actual spiritual dimension of what this means for us. Well, that's what I want to talk about today, just very briefly. First of all, it's a very interesting thing. In the dharmic worldview, the dharmic worldview teaches us that anything that has power to it is indeed a power, is indeed an energy. And it's very interesting. You know, when we think of money in the ordinary sense, what do we tend to think of? We tend to think of an object. We tend to think of a piece of paper that has writing on it that's certified by a government. You know, we tend to think of maybe gold, maybe silver, but again, we tend to think about an object. Of course, the truth of the matter is that the power of that object is not what it actually is. Rather, it is a power that is in fact metaphysical. It is actually the power to do things with that money. If I were to hold up a $100 bill right now, and if I were to say, I'm about to give this $100 bill to someone here in this room, people would get very excited. Now, the truth of the reality is, of course, what is that dollar bill? It's a piece of paper. You know, the actual dollar bill itself, the actual paper, for that matter, gold itself, or silver itself, or the largest diamond that we could hold in our hand itself, is in actuality just an object. Just an object, you know. As far as a material object is concerned, as far as the material properties, even the largest diamond on earth really could be used as a paperweight. It really has no more value. However, at the same time, we know that there is a power that is behind that object. And what is that power? It's the ability to do. Okay? It's the ability to do with that object. See, with that $100 bill, as opposed to a Blimpies coupon, I know that with that $100 bill, I can do something. So again, in actuality, it's not the object in itself that's of importance, but it's the Shakti, it's the power that is of importance. Now, seeing material objects in this way, with the dharmic perspective, we actually see wealth itself as indeed being a power, as being an energy, but more, whose energy? Because you see, energy does not exist in a vacuum. You know, if you talk about energy, energy has a source. You know, we don't simply have a blob of electricity that's just kind of floating here. You know, electricity has a source. You have to go to a socket, and even then, it comes from somewhere else. You know, so when we talk about energy, we're talking about the source of energy, and more, when we say energy, whose energy is it? There is energy, but then there's the energetic. You know, that being who is the source of that energy. Understood in this way, and again, seeing wealth as an energy, in actuality, it is something that is a manifestation of the divine. Okay? Now, interestingly, when we take this very different, more metaphysical approach to the nature of what is wealth and what is the purpose of wealth, we now have the ability to both perceive wealth in a more spiritual manner, but also to use it in a more spiritual manner, to have a relationship with it in a more spiritual manner. You know, it's very interesting how, certainly in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the most important scripture of Dharma, but also in many different traditions, whether you talk about especially Confucius or Aristotle, we have many spiritual individuals and traditions that explain to us that if we want to have happiness in this world, materially and spiritually, what we need to seek is a life of moderation. Neither too much nor too little. In the Bhagavad Gita, for example, which is the most, again, important textbook, the most important scripture of Dharma and of yoga spirituality, Krishna explains to us that the true yogi neither eats too much nor too little, neither sleeps too much nor does not sleep enough. In other words, moderation, balance in all things. Now, seeing wealth as, again, an energy rather than a thing, seeing that energy as having its source in God, in actuality, we can have a relationship with even money in such a way that with this perspective and seeking moderation in all things that we do, even money itself can become something that's spiritualized. Now, how do we do this? How do we do this? Again, we turn to the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna explains to us that money itself, and in fact material objects themselves, are neither good nor evil. They're neither really harmful or beneficial to us. But really, in actuality, what either benefits us or harms us is, again, what happens internally. You know, you ever hear the saying, money is the root of all evil? You know, this is a famous saying in the West. The Bhagavad Gita, Dharma, would radically disagree with this and say that, no, money is just an object. What is either good or evil is what we internally choose to do with that object. You know?